17 gods were sent down to build the world. 16 of them were men, and when they arrived, they decided the 17th, the only woman among them, had nothing to offer. So they pushed her aside and tried to do the work without her. Nothing they touched worked, not one thing. They had underestimated the one god among them who actually held the power of life itself. This is the story of Osun. In Yoruba tradition, Olodumare, the supreme creator, sent 17 Iranmoli, primordial spirits, down from the heavens to shape the still-forming earth into a world fit for life. 16 of them were men. One was a woman. Her name was Osun. When they arrived, the 16 male orisha sat down together to divide the work of shaping the world, and decided, without asking her, that Osun's presence wasn't necessary. Some accounts say they mocked her outright. Others say they simply ignored her, certain that a task this important had to be men's work. She didn't argue with them, she simply withdrew and let them try it without her. What none of them understood yet was that Osun wasn't a minor spirit they could simply work around. Among the 17, she alone carried the power to make the earth fertile, to let rain fall, wombs carry life, and wounds heal. Without her in the room, that power simply didn't exist anymore. With Osun set aside, everything the 16 orisha attempted began to fail. The rain refused to fall. Sickness spread with no cure that worked. Women who wanted children could not carry them. Every plan the gods put in place collapsed, one after another, and none of them understood why. Eventually, out of options, they went to Orunmila, the orisha of wisdom, and asked him to consult Ifa, the sacred system of divination, to find out what had gone wrong. The answer humbled them. The world was failing because they had shut out the one god, whose power the entire plan had depended on from the very beginning. So the 16 orisha who had dismissed her went back and knelt before her and asked, formally, for her forgiveness and for her power back. Osun forgave them and let her waters flow again. Rain returned, harvests grew, children were born. The myth is direct about what that meant. It was never that Osun needed the other 16 gods to matter. It was that they could not survive without her. Osun's power shows itself again in a different story about Ogun, a separate myth, not a sequel to the one you may already know. Long before any massacre, tradition says Ogun simply grew weary of Ila-If itself, tired of forging tool after tool for a people who never stopped needing him. So he walked into the forest and refused to come back. Every craft that depended on iron ground to a halt. Gods and humans alike began to feel the absence of the one figure holding their tools together. The other orisha tried to bring him back the way they knew best, with weapons, with force, with warriors marching straight at him. Every attempt failed. Ogun, still armed and furious at being disturbed, drove every one of them back out of the forest. So Osun went in alone, unarmed, no weapon, no army, just dancing, a little honey on her own lips, and patience. She didn't demand that he return. She simply danced closer, offering him her own sweetness until the same fury that had chased off an army of armed gods simply began to ease. Where every weapon in 16 gods' hands had failed, Osun walked out of that forest with Ogun following behind her. Sweetness had succeeded exactly where force could not. Centuries later, tradition says a hunter named Timahin found a dense, untouched forest along a river and told his friend Laroye, whose people were suffering through drought and famine back home. Laroye led his people into that forest to settle it, not realizing the river running through it belonged to Osun, and that her sacred dye pots, used for her own indigo clothwork, sat along its banks. While clearing the land, a felled tree crashed into the river and shattered her pots. From beneath the water, the settlers heard Osun's own voice, furious. They had broken what was hers. Laroye knelt at the water's edge and begged forgiveness on behalf of his people. Osun accepted it, on the condition that they move their settlement to higher ground, safe from her river's floods. They obeyed, and the town flourished under her protection ever since. That settlement still exists today. It's called Osogbo. Osogbo isn't a ruin or a memory. The sacred grove Osun protected there still stands today. 75 hectares of forest along the river, dotted with shrines built in her honor. significant enough that UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site in 2005. Every August, that grove hosts one of Nigeria's largest living festivals, 2 weeks of ceremony that draws roughly 100,000 people from around the world, led by a young woman called the Yoruba, who carries a sacred calabash of offerings to the river in Osun's name. And it doesn't stop at that one river. Carried across the Atlantic during the slave trade, she's still worshipped today as Osun across Cuba and as Oxum throughout Brazil, the same goddess of love, sweetness, and fresh water, honored under different names on different continents centuries later. Every figure on this channel so far has needed force to win something. Osun never did. She was excluded by 16 gods who thought her power was the least important thing in the room, and every single one of them learned they were wrong. She wasn't the loudest god in that story. She was the one none of the others could actually survive without. If you haven't met Ogun yet, his own episode is right there. Subscribe.